Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Liam Scott, and I'm a journalist based in Washington, D.C., who has reported on press freedom issues over the past few years for a variety of news outlets, and I'll be moderating our discussion tonight. While people are joining us, I just want to go over how things will run for the next hour or so. The International Community of the Society of Professional Journalists is a community of journalists who encourage and champion press freedom globally. And the format of this will be pretty simple. Our guest, filmmaker Javier Velasco, and I will have a conversation. And while we chat, you can pose questions in the Q&A option, which is usually at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. The co-chair of the international community, Dan Kubisky, will be posting various links related to the discussion that we will be having this evening. And I also want to remind before we get started that this talk is being recorded and will be placed on our YouTube channel, which Dan will also post in the chat box. So Mexico is among the deadliest countries in the world for journalists. The Committee to Protect Journalists considers it the most dangerous country for reporters in the Western Hemisphere, and it has been considered the most dangerous country for journalists in the world outside of conflict zones. According to Reporters Without Borders, 7 journalists have been killed in Mexico since the beginning of this year alone. About 10 years ago, investigative journalist Regina Martínez and photojournalist Rubén Espinosa were killed in Mexico. These slayings became the inspiration for the fictional movie Cocodrilos, which means crocodiles in Spanish. The movie looks at the issues facing a photojournalist in Mexico when its dedication to informing the public gets tested by corrupt government officials and organized crime. We are fortunate to have the creator and award-winning director of Cocodrilos with us tonight. Javier Velasco was nominated for the 2012 Mexican Academy Ariel Award in the Best Fiction Short Film category for Juan and La Borrega, which premiered nationally at the 26th Guadalajara International Film Festival and internationally at the AFI Fest in Los Angeles. His film, En el Séptimo Día, won the John Cassavetes Award at the 2019 Independent Spirit Awards. And now, Cocodrilos, which premiered at the 41st Chicago Latino Film Festival earlier this year, had its Mexican premiere at the 40th Guadalajara International Film Festival in June. So Javier, thank you again so much for joining us tonight. I'd love to start with something that I thought was the most interesting about this was that it's a fictional film, obviously inspired by these real tragic killings that happened over a decade ago, but it is a dramatic telling. It is fictional. I was wondering, as a journalist myself, I guess, why did you decide to, make this a film, make this fictional, as opposed to perhaps a documentary, for instance, about dangers facing journalists in Mexico?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and chat with you. It's a very, very good question because which I've been asking myself before, why is there is not a narrative film about this issue, the killing of journalists in Mexico? And I'm saying this because I consider this one to be the first one to with this approach, like right on the issue. But yeah, definitely there are a few documentaries, like film documentaries and journalist documentaries. There are a bunch actually, and I thought that it was very important to kind of like get a different vehicle to take this reflection to this problem to different audiences, which maybe they're not familiar with documentaries or they're not into documentaries. And I think the power of film and movies, it's such that you can portray stories with a dramatic structure and get involved emotions, and at the same time that you're talking about a social issue or a social problem that needs discussion and needs visibility. So basically, I don't do documentaries myself. Like, I work editing documentaries, but I'm not a documentary director. I'm more into the narrative world, and that was like my first instinct to write a story, a narrative, a fiction about this.
Awesome. Just as a follow-up to that, I read there was an article in the LA Times about the film, and you said that you said, I believe fiction is a medium that can reach more people than a documentary. I was hoping to hear you elaborate a little bit on that idea, and what I guess what about the medium of film has more of a capacity perhaps to reach people and to touch people.
Yeah, I think, of course, like I'm referring to like a general audience. I definitely like maybe in some countries documentaries are, big thing, but generally the documentary world it's more like a niche audience. There are of course like all these genre of documentaries that are like true crime, which are huge everywhere, but usually the documentaries about social issues or other topics are not very well received by the general public. We have to remember that part of the, one of the phases of movies is to entertain. So documentaries, for the most part, are not entertaining for a lot of people. Whereas the narrative fiction, like having a story, being able to follow a traditional, like arc and a character, main character with, facing troubles and trying to solve them and going through different like emotions and struggles and being able to connect or empathize with the character is it's I think it's easier to for the general audiences to engage into that. And I think yeah, it is very powerful. I mean I'm not saying that this is gonna, make a big change, but I believe that movies through history they have been used to spread propaganda. They're being used to spread, certain ideologies, and with the same power to spark conversation and this type of topics. Um, Basically, well, this film it's based in my home state, Veracruz. It was shot in the Puerto de Veracruz, so and the real life events uh, that started this creative process in me were happened in Jalapa and Veracruz. So this is like a very localized story, but I think the theme is global. So even though like it happens in a specific location with a specific type of characters and journalists, I think the general theme is global. So I think that's part of the strength of movies.
Absolutely, absolutely. Something else that I thought was interesting is that you've said before that through this film you wanted to address the problem of violence in Veracruz. I'm curious as to why you decided to tell that story of violence in the region specifically through the lens of dangers facing journalists and not maybe something more general. Why did you specifically decide to tell that story through this lens?
Right. We had a president, Felipe Calderon, which started what it was called the war, the drug wars. And what that did is that sparkled violence all, across the country. And Jalapa was a very cultural city, very yeah, very cultural. The university is there. And so I grew up in a calm city, small with music and theater and dance and all, you know, whatever that a small town can provide it, you know, quiet. And all of a sudden, we started seeing militaries on the streets, with assault rifles, and we started hearing there was a shoot over here, there's a shoot over there, there's extortions going on to business. And this was around 2009 when I was shocked by this, and that's when I decided to create this short film, Juan y la Borrega, which is about how the violence impacts us or changes. And that I think that was the seed that about me caring about this topic of how violence impact us. And it was later in 2012 when Regina Martínez was killed that was also very shocking on how it happened. A disclaimer, I'm not a journalist, and I'm not I was not close with Regina or Rubén Espinosa, which is the photojournalist that was killed in 2015. And but the I don't know, I have a lot of empathy for how this was happening. I mean, according to Article 19, during that period of time, 2010 and 2016, there were 18 journalists killed in Veracruz, including Regina and Ruben.
Mhm.
So we're talking in 6 years, 18 journalists were killed. And the way, there was absolutely a fake resolution to their cases. There was no in case of Regina, they had a person that apparently was the killer, but he was tortured to basically sign, the his confession. And similarly, the case in Ruben hasn't been clarified, because and 10 years later. So anyway, that's why it impacted me so much, and I was you know I needed to say something about that, and that's the reason.
Awesome. Awesome. That's really, really interesting. Um, I'm curious about your creative process in writing the script for the film. Can you tell me a little bit about how you approached it, how much research had to go into writing the script, what your actual writing process was like for creating it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so like I said, the idea came in 2015, and then it took me 4 more years to actually like sit down and say, okay, I'm gonna do this. And by that time, I started writing the idea, developing the idea, and then I asked my sister Magali Velasco. She's a novelist, and we started, creating the story. So basically, uh, we 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 started with my idea, and we developed a story, and we did a creative experiment, which is, from that story we came up with. She wrote a novel, and I wrote a screenplay, and it's very interesting because, of course, like different languages, the novel, can go into details, character development, ideas, and film cannot. Like, you have limited time, you have to structure a certain way, etc. So from there, I started writing my own thing, and it took me a couple of years to have a draft that was good. And then it was in 2020, I think, that 2021, that I was selected in a screenplay workshop called Sine Qua Non Lab. And I that was so important in writing this screenplay, because it's a workshop. So we had someone that was guiding us, and she's Pasalicia Garcia Diego. She wrote all the screenplays from the renowned Mexican director, and so that guidance was essential. And that's how I ended up having a shooting script.
Mhm.
And but from that there was a really thorough process of researching because I wanted to, this is honoring this journalist, but I also wanted to approach from a very respectful point of view. I wanted to avoid at all costs, to um, be exploitative of this topic, and so that to me that the the right way to do it was actually talking to journalists, to read a lot, to watch a lot of documentaries, and go deeper into this. So with both my sister and I, we talked to some journalists in Veracruz, and there's a really important book. I don't know what's the title in English, but it's called Romper el Silencio, and that it's a book that collects like different journalists talk about their experiences of violence and how they have to exile and so leaving that violence so close, and so that was very important as well. And I'll say that, well, for the people that have seen the movie, you can tell that there are different topics intertwined, the disappearances of people, and also how the mothers that search for their loved ones, and this is something that we research as well with it's a group of mothers that look for their loved ones, and it's called Solecito. And they were very open to share their experiences with us and all the pain that it takes, and how their lives are or change, after the loved ones disappear and never to be found, or sometimes they can find them, but after many many years. So there was, yeah, around research.
What was that? Can you tell me a little bit more about what you learned from speaking with journalists in Veracruz and the challenges that they face day to day in doing their jobs?
Right. Yeah, I mean, they of course like um are not, that there are like young ones, but they live through this period of time when the violence was at its peak against journalists, and so they remember, they knew like some, they knew Regina and Rubén, so they talked, a little bit about them, and I learned how they protect themselves nowadays,
Hmm.
how they have like safety um, resources, but it's everything is within them basically, and some organizations as well, but not the government. And also, I learned that the wages are really low, which is so sad. And I also how the dynamics are within their job, the day to day, and how they cover some news, but that none of them were actively doing like investigative journalism at the time. Um, Two of them, they were photojournalists, and the other one was both. They kind of work, within they write the note, and they also shoot, and so they're trying to do everything by themselves, and like, yeah, trying to protect themselves and being in constant communication with each other. And whenever someone hears about something that sounds dangerous, they're like, okay, this is happening. We're gonna, I'm going there. And so that's how they nowadays they take um yeah, they take these safety measures. And but yeah, it's a really really tough. Compared to what I've seen here in the States, I think the conditions are very different.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask, were you living in Mexico when Martinez and Espinosa were killed, or had you left the country by that point?
No, I was living in Mexico still. Yeah.
And can you tell me about, I guess, like how, I don't know if you remember how you specifically learned or generally what the reaction was among, either community members in your town or generally kind of what was that time like and especially when these two journalists were killed within a few years of each other.
Right. Well, I mean, the killing of Regina was a shocking thing to everyone. She was a very renowned journalist. She collaborated with the magazine Proceso, which is uh, a very important uh, journalist magazine in Mexico. It's very critic of everything that's going on, and they do a lot of investigative journalism. So they really go deep into things, and allegedly that's why she was killed because she was investigating something, related to a case of corruption, government, and the organized crime and the way that they resolved you know the crime was so absurd that everybody knew that it was a cover up. And yeah, it sparked a lot of protests from people, from journalists, from Proceso and other well-known media. And so it was yeah, a scandal. And then a few years later, Rubén, the way he was killed was very ominous because he had to fled Jalapa because he was threatened
Mhm.
and his life was threatened, and along with another activists, and he had to fled the state and went to Mexico City, and he was killed there, but in a way that it looks planned. It was like very, very suspicious, and of course there was like a killer there that got, but it never it's never the what you can tell that how it's what happened. And there is actually a documentary that it's called I don't remember the name, but it's Caso Narvarte, and there they go through all the details of the case, and today it's nothing, all the it was a case that was manipulated, and it was never conclusive. So impunity is something that destroys, freedom destroys journalism, and it's something that it's terrible that's going on in Mexico for many, many years. So, someone gets killed and nothing happens, you know?
That's a really good point, and I think also kind of speaks to how this is a story about what happens in Mexico, but it also, kind of there are similarities between the situation in Mexico and in other countries. I mean, globally, as you know, impunity in journalist killings is about 80% over the past 10 years.
Right.
And impunity is an issue in Mexico when it comes to journalist killings, but it's an issue in other countries as well. Um, can you tell me a little bit more, kind of in that vein of how this is a story about Mexico, but it does speak to broader issues in the world? How did you kind of balance, kind of think about that as you were, creating this film that, kind of think about, yes, this is a story about Mexico, but it also, has important, it is also relevant, globally as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, as a creator, you always have this you wish that will resonate with the most audiences. Um, and in this case, the theme I was portraying is that, telling the truth can cost your life actually in a place like Mexico. And like you said, like we've seen this happening whenever there is the need for the control of the narrative. There's always going to be that need of silencing, the people that are speaking up. And in that regard, like journalism is it's basically, the right to know the facts and the truth by the people. And that's the only way, there's a healthy society and a democracy. But whenever there's a need to, create a narrative and control information, and or silence the voices that are share or investigate these truths, there's always going to be, this type of punishment, or aggression or violence against. So in that regard, like it becomes so general
Mm.
that you can apply it to any of these, globally, any of those places that something similar is happening. And it's just like an example of what can happen within certain circumstances.
Before we go on, I do just want to remind our audience that they are free to put their own questions into the chat, and I can ask them on your behalf, or Javier can see them. Um, so moving in a slightly different, I guess kind of going off of what you just said, given how, the dark nature of this film, are you hopeful about, the future for journalism in Mexico, for the safety of journalists in Mexico?
Am I hopeful? That's a good question. Deep one. Yeah, I mean, I think people. I mean, I'm hopeful as long as I believe in the power of truth and the willing of people to speak up and to claim their rights for information. And I believe that, sadly, governments are not very good at protecting their citizens in this type of problematics. And but there are a lot of, organizations that protect journalists. If there's, there's a um, a big how do you say, like, oh yeah, like they're organizing against, to push back, against these oppressions. And so I really, yeah, I think it's not a battle that is gonna end. But I think we just have to keep pushing. And because otherwise, if we don't have freedom of press, freedom of expression, like what remains? It's all control. And uh, you know, in Mexico nowadays, the rate of aggressions against journalists has decreased a little bit, but there are efforts to to make it more difficult for journalists to publish, like truth that is not good for the people in power, or the controlling narrative. And I believe that's also like a serious threat against, the freedom of press. And it's as simple as, I can sue you because I consider this defamation.
Mm.
And as if you are not able to expose facts that might not, that speak badly in the sense of, like, criminally, of someone, and this person is just gonna sue you, so you cannot publish anything about that. Then, there's the risk that you cannot actually talk about these truths. And so, I mean, I'm hopeful. I have hope in people in general. not so much in institutions.
Hmm. Um, I guess also on the subject of hope, what do you hope the response to the film will be in Mexico?
Well, like I said, one of my motivations was to start talking about this problem,
Hmm.
and so my hopes are that through the narrative, through the the thriller treatment, we can sparkle this conversation in people, and they can start talking about it because. Like I said, one of my worries is that the normalization of violence in our societies. It is not, it should not be normal to live, to hearing that they're killing, people every day, and then they're killing journalists, every now and then, and it's the impunity, it's there. So my hopes are that this story is going to resonate with people, and they want to talk about it, and within their circles, it's that's how it starts. You start talking to your partner, your family, and that can spread the conversation and make it, yeah, it's not normal.
You bring up a really good point about, the risk of normalization of attacks on reporters. I'm curious if when you were growing up in Mexico during the peak of violence against reporters, did you feel like it was being normalized? Did you feel like people had like it was difficult to kind of maintain momentum and interest in, or I don't know if interest is the right word, but to do you think that it was being normalized when you were living in Mexico? If
Right. Well, I mean, there's always there's always been some sort of attacks on press, but at that time it was at its peak because of the violence that was unleashed in the whole country. I think at the moment it was not normalized. It
Hmm.
wasn't normalized, but it soon became normalized, and that happens. Like, yeah, 10 years later. I believe that it's not such as shocking as it was before, and that's very sad. That's something that I don't think it's good for society, as well as violence, not only against journalists, but in Mexico, like you turn on the news, and there's always something, some sort of violence, killings, people disappearing. Um, they found this in Jalisco, this ranch where there were like remains, and it was for training people, and so you start hearing all this violence of the cartels, and all of the sudden people start to shut down, and they don't want to know more about it.
Hmm.
And in that moment, that becomes normalized because it's like, okay, and something that we humans, we adapt very well to a lot of terrible things, and I think that's a way of people adapting to a violent environment. They just shut down, and they're like, okay, I'm just gonna do my thing. I don't want to hear anything, but that only makes the problem go bigger and uncontrolled, unchecked, and so that's why I think we need to, as an artist, we need to talk about these topics, and get to people through a different route rather than just news, or just uh yeah, a documentary.
Hmm. I'm curious about, I guess, are you able to speak at all about the emotional impact that working on this film had on you personally, on working on, obviously very, intense, difficult material? I think, in my own work reporting on threats facing journalists, it can be very emotionally, it's emotionally intense and you want to maintain a certain distance as a reporter, one to make sure that this, the reporting is objective, but also to kind of protect yourself as, yourself emotionally as a person. I'm curious, I guess, I'm not a filmmaker, so is that something that you kind of a tactic that you use when you're working on something that's as, emotionally intense, like this film? Do you try and maintain a certain distance from it to protect yourself, or do you kind of dive into creating something like this?
Yeah, I think if it was a documentary, I think the impact will be greater.
Mm,
I was I work on editing a documentary series that it was about a really dark topic, and that then I had to, watch hours and hours of materials, very disturbing materials, and we actually had, a session with someone that was um, yeah, giving us advice on how to deal with this so it wouldn't take a toll on us because working with the same and with shocking images, yeah, it can get you. But in this particular case, it was really hard to during the research. That was
mm,
the hard part because of course like it was reading about real people, real cases of violence, real cases of threats and like how people went through terrible um things and also watching all these documentaries and talking to people as well. You yourself, how it is to interview someone, and yeah, I was definitely touched by what they were saying. But that was a short period of time, and yeah, I did. I'm not gonna say that writing the screenplay was easy because it is very intense, and also shooting this was very intense as well, and working with the actors, with Jose Melendez, which is the main character, what plays the main character. Um, I started working with him months before, and I gave him some literature to for him to do his own research and try to understand the motivations and the in and outs of the character and we had like very deep conversations about this and why do we think that he will continue doing this despite the fact that he's been threatened, despite the fact that he's seen danger and all this in and outs from the character. That was also tough. So I will tell you this at the end of the film when I finished editing and everything. I was like, this this was really hard.
mhm.
I wanna do something different next.
Um, did you, on the question of why, to keep going, why journalists keep going and doing this work despite the threats, was that something that, I guess I'm curious in your conversations in the research stage, of your conversations with journalists in Veracruz, why did they, what reasons did they give you for why they continue to do this work despite the challenges that they faced?
Right. It's something that I'm still thinking about because like I said that the it's not well paid. I'm talking about Mexico specifically. It's not well paid. There's a lot of work involved. It's very dangerous, and but there's something idealistic about the job. There's something that they feel it's like a mission as well to share the truth, to investigate, specifically the investigative journalism, and to put out the truth basically, and to fight back against the the corruption and the abuse and the you know yeah, the threats on human rights. And so basically what I take from all the what the conversations or what I've read is that it's basically like a calling.
Hmm.
It's something deep. It is difficult to explain, but it's something like a calling.
Absolutely. Before I ask my next question, just a reminder again to the audience, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box. Um, I'm curious if in working on this film, if you did you watch any other journalism films like Spotlight or movies like that, or if you have any other like journalism films that you like that maybe you took inspiration from in creating your own.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely Spotlight was one of my references, and All the President's Men. Those two movies were my immediate, reference because yeah, I watched other films, but those two I felt they had this, kind of like a thriller-esque vibe to them, like whodunit kind of thing. And of course, All the President's Men, it's an amazing film, and it has all this, the texture and the contrast, and the cinematography is very, very thriller-esque as well, noir kind of thing. But specifically with my film, like, because it happens, almost everything happens almost during daytime, and also we have some interiors, but it also the geography is more like a tropical area. So I ended up, I was like dealing how to use the noir, the style of the film noir kind of thing. So I also refer to Miami Vice, which is it's a crime thriller. The latest one, the Michael Mann one, and but it happens in, kind of like a tropical zone.
Mm.
So I was looking at that one. Also, there's this Julian Schnabel's, I forget the name, but it's with Javier Bardem is in it, but it happens in Havana, and El Puerto de Veracruz is very close to La Habana, and they're like sister cities. So I was looking at that too, and then Alex Webb photography, and so that's how like I came up with what I call the tropical noir aesthetics. And I just, it was so hot during that time, so I just let the people like just sweat, and you can tell that sometimes you can tell they are sweating, and that's real sweat. And so we were like just embracing that, embracing the textures of the city, which it has this deteriorated because of the salt that's in the air. And so yeah, that was more of my references.
That's really interesting. I just have a couple more questions for you before we wrap up.
Sure.
Obviously, so you're based in Brooklyn now. The Trump administration has launched myriad attacks on the media since President Trump returned to the White House in January. Um, Obviously, different situations in the United States versus threats to press freedom in Mexico. But I'm curious if you can speak to any maybe through lines that you've seen just by living in the United States, but by working on this film about challenges facing, threats facing journalists in Mexico. Are there any similarities or any differences that you can speak to?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, there are different countries. It's different ways of doing journalism. But what I just learned, or one of the main differences, is the corporate media. We do have in Mexico corporate media, but I was never like so much, like conscious about how in the States there are like different outlets that are controlled by corporations. And it to me that was something interesting because being in Mexico, I always knew that this Televisa was the main corporation that they have the TV, they control the TV for for many, many decades. And then there was this other channel that then started, it was like a by corporations that controlling the television. So, and here we have like many other types of outlets, and there's also like independent journalism. And that was something that it was very interesting to me. Now I'm seeing how, of course, the money corrupts, in every level, and the wish for money that, it's always gonna drive you into um, different areas in like control information. It's one of those. If you don't want to create, discomfort into people in power. So that's how it starts. And this is something that resonates with my film, that you know the in this fiction, the government is colluded with the organized crime, and they don't want, truths to come out, and they want to control, and they want to silence, and they want their truth to only be the only one. And so, yeah, the control of information, I think, is something that it's very worrying.
My last question for you, is one that we typically ask at the end of our, events here is what does press freedom, mean to you? What does a free press mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's very, very important. It's the right for the people to know facts and know truths, and it's the base for democracy, and it's the base for a wealthy society. Um, like, if you don't have freedom of press, then you're at the, control of the powers, the call it government, call it corporations, call it, whatever is on top. And if you don't have the trust of information, if you don't have access to information, you cannot make decisions, thoughtful decisions. And so that's why it's, to me, freedom of press is a basic right for people.
Great. Well, I think that's a great point to end on. Javier, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I really, really appreciate it. And it was so fascinating just to hear you speak about, your film and press freedom in Mexico. And to the audience, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we hope to see you at the next event. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. Thank you.